Get onto the freeway here. The existing house style is a Spanish style you can see in the photographs. I think the photographs are handed out there. They're going to be matching the existing style. Project is located in the Woodlands neighborhood. It's part of the Ross Moines area, though it's not a part of the historic district, but it is in Ross Moines. The property is fairly falls right in the categories of all the neighborhood homes. It doesn't stand out as being too large, too small. It's about the same, and it's one story and will remain one story. When we look at the categories of site planning and mass and scale, the staff felt that it fell in line, again, with the neighborhood. The only areas that we thought we would bring some issues to the board's attention relate to design and detailing, and each of those actually can be reviewed at the conditions and considerations at the back. We have 5 of them. So when you're looking at we look at the front door. We have an example of a front door on the elevation, and we have an example of a front door here. So we had thought that this might be more compatible with the front door for this architectural style. That was our recommendation for number 1. Number 2, there's a quadrifoil shown on the it was shown here. They had a quadrifoil.
It's on the ones that were shipped to us.
Yes. Oh, it was on the ones you were shipped to you. Got it.
But I don't think it's on that.
And so we were thinking more of something, a small square accent window with the iron bars that relate, that you might see with the Spanish design. We thought that the yellow color might be a little bit not in keeping with the Spanish style, so we thought something in the tan color range. We're making that recommendation here. This is just a sort of a bookkeeping thing, but to wrap the tile around the corners like you normally would, wrapping around the edges of the eaves. And finally, over here, this is the only consideration. At the time that the house addition came in, all the windows had already been changed. There was a separate project that they did, changing all the windows except for the windows that were related to just the addition area. So we thought that at the time, if they had come in with the entire package, including changing windows, we might have asked for a little better window material here. So we have a consideration to consider changing that window to from vinyl to a wood window. That's basically it. All the windows, the vinyl windows are block frame. All the grids are external. So when you look at the photographs, those are external grids with a block frame insulation sill. I was at the site next. That concludes my review.
And these window change-outs were with them?
Oh, yeah, that was all done with, but it was done before the applications. And that was just a consideration. I can answer questions. The applicant is here to answer your questions.
Do we issue the questions? Should we just
Do you want to hear this from the applicant?
have the applicant come up, but should we hear?
Do you have any questions?
Say, or?
I don't have any questions.
You just want to hear them? Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, you might want to hear whether they're okay
Yeah.
with the
Windows.
corrections the findings ask.
Yeah. Okay, so Andrea Lantos, please come up and state your name and address for the record.
Andrea Lantos.
Or can you and speak into the microphone? Yeah.
Andrea Lantos, 700 Cordova Avenue. So, should I just? So I think obviously what you're requesting with the tile and the roof, we have no problem doing that, and I think that there were really 2 things that I would like to address. One is the window that we just changed, and that's a relatively large window, a 6 by 6 foot, so it's also a very expensive window. So if there's any way that we don't have to go back, we just had it installed about a couple months ago, and obviously had all the permits and everything, and we have been working with the planning department from the minute that we were in escrow. So if there is any way to stay away, it's about $1,000 to replace that window just because of the size of it. We would very much appreciate if we didn't have to do that. And it's on the other side of the project where everything remains the way it was, so I don't necessarily think that what we're adding on to has any effect on that window at all. And then the other question I had was on the color. And I have pictures. I don't know if you're interested, but on the blog there are about 10 Spanish-style homes that are different shades of yellow, some much more brighter than others. So if you can recommend something that is not necessarily tan or brown, because the moment you paint it, it just looks dirty, even if it's newly painted. If there's another shade of yellow that you would feel more comfortable with, that you would recommend, we would gladly do that. I don't know if I have the iPad. I took pictures of houses on the block, if that helps at all, just to see. There are a lot of, like I said, some of them are very bright yellow that I wouldn't necessarily go with, but some of them are more muted, almost tannish yellow, but more on the yellow side. So I don't know if that's something that maybe you can recommend. And the same with the door. I think for us, really what we care, if there's a way to have glass in it, just to get some light into the hallway, we would appreciate any recommendation that you have for the front door. Again, I think we just pick something that look good to us, but if you can show us some examples that you feel more comfortable with, if they have some glass inserts, more certainly.
Okay. Is that it?
Yep.
Great, thanks. So we'll close the public session for this project. And who wants to start?
Yeah, I don't have a problem with it. I wouldn't want to make somebody change a window who actually got a permit, so, which is always nice to say, and we want to encourage people to get permits. I would only make the comment, I think it was unfortunate that you let them do that kind of window, because I think it does not go with the style at all. And even the previous window there was no dividers in the previous window, right? Was it one sheet of glass?
Yeah, just one.
Yeah, which is what would have been on that. I think it's a really unfortunate window choice, and when I saw it, I thought it didn't have a permit. That's why I asked, because it's completely inappropriate. So, I mean, I would want to change it just because it's completely inappropriate, but there's no way I would saddle them with that. I don't think that's appropriate at all. I agree with all the conditions. I think they're all good conditions. It'll make your house look consistent, which I think is your intent. I would like to condition it. You have a lintel, which is the piece that's above the window on the living room. It's like a brown piece. There's not a lot of details on the house, and most of these houses don't have a lot of details, but what is there is important. So I would really recommend that lintel piece at least happens on the next window on the side and the ones along the front. So just to keep it consistent. I mean, it's a nice detail on it, and it should match, and I think you'd be supportive. It would match the living room window. There's a lintel above the living room.
You're saying?
No, I actually want to change out the side living room and the one in the front. Is that?
I'm sorry,
You
we
don't have
can't
to-
have any cross discussion because it's not, when you're not able to speak into the microphone.
The
we
windows
apologize.
aren't numbered, but the one I'm talking about is the living room, the side living room window.
This one.
Right. And then the new front.
Yes.
Yeah.
The guest room. Yeah. The guest room. Yeah.
Yes.
And even over the front door. It should be over the front door also.
A lintel.
The lintel piece to match.
Okay, that's the piece.
I mean, there's not a lot of detail, and I think it would really help the design. Other than that, I'm supportive of it. I just lament that you went to the effort of getting a permit, and really unfortunate on the windows, but that's okay. Live long and prosper.
Or color
okay.
choice.
That's the only condition I would make would be the lintel. So.
You care the colors?
The color I'm flexible on. I mean, I think I would leave it to staff. We don't have a color chart to choose from, so I would. Is staff comfortable reviewing the color? Okay, I will leave it for staff.
Door, window.
Front door? Oh, front door. I think the one that you have in the latest one with the way that's divided is in keeping with the style. I think it would be nice. I think you could probably find doors of that where those panels, maybe the upper ones have glass. There might be some wrought iron pieces that go with it. Again, I would leave that for staff to review. I'm sure you could come to a solution. Am I forgetting anything? I went to.
Okay.
Okay.
Can you pass the photos down? lintel again. Next.
Oh, I concur, so no comment.
I also agree with the staff recommendations, and I appreciate the fact that you did get a permit to change the window. Whether it matches now or doesn't, it's secondary at this point. So eliminating item number 5, or recommendation number 5, I would be supportive of this project. And of course, that's the window.
Okay. Yeah, I'm also supportive of the project. I think it's nicely done. It's modest in scale and matches the context it's going into. I like your recommendation for the lintel design on top of all the other elements in the front. I think that'll add that nice little bit of detail to just gives it more character. And in terms of your door, having light in the door, I think the idea of having the glass with the wrought iron as the bars that go across it, that those heavy Spanish door kind of feeling, that would be kind of nice to see on the door, and then maybe just keep the window over the bathroom, just a simple rectangular window,
Right.
and add the lintel above it as well, so that keeps it consistent.
You don't want too many bars,
I think
agree.
staff's comment about the quatrefoil is it's a little bit fancy for such a plain face. Maybe it just needs to be something a little different, or not quite so elaborate. But yeah, just maybe put all the focus in the door, because they'd have a nice wood door. Maybe put like some wrought iron detailing on the door, and then the glass could be more integrated into the door instead of having a paneled door with glass in it, which looks a little more contemporary. So the door that you have on your elevation, that kind of style with the glass, they have or an opening kind of thing in it. As for the color, I think you'll figure out a yellow that's not so bright, and in keeping with the Spanish style. So I think the colors is almost there. You're close. I don't think you have to work too hard to get to that right. I think you're on the right track. So, and I think that's.
Just the color on the door.
I think we'll let staff work with you on the color of the door and the color of the house.
I think the
So-
preference would be for a darker color or a dark stain in that color spectrum.
You can match closely to the lintel color.
We'll be happy to work with the applicant on the colors of the door and the color of the house. That is a fairly easy matter to resolve.
Yeah.
Our question is regarding the door. Typically, the windows on this kind of door are fairly small, more like a peephole window, maybe 12 inches by 12 inches with the bars on them.
Right.
That's what the board is referring to, because what they've shown is a window that's about half the height of the door. I just wanted to clarify, because
I wasn't talking about the example. I was actually going off of the elevation, not the...
okay,
I should have clarified.
okay.
I meant off the elevation, the heavier paneling.
So a smaller window that would be consistent with the style, and we can work with the applicant on that.
And for me, I think my visualization is it's a centered window with the bars going across, and that could be like your peephole, your 12 by 12 little
Right.
door panel with a window glass in it, insert in it.
Typically,
versus being like in
typically
the
it's
panelization.
about 4 feet high in the door,
Yeah.
12 inch by 12 inch with bars on it. And then, would you like us to remove consideration number 5, or leave it in as a consideration?
Well, they're not going to change it. They've
Right,
said
so,
so, and we've said that it's fine because they
Okay.
permit it. So I think we can just take it out.
So we'll remove that, and the condition on the lintels would read, lintels should be included on the side living room window, the door, and the front window on the addition.
And then the
that's
bathroom.
And the bathroom?
If it becomes a rectangular window,
Okay. And is that a condition or consideration?
Condition.
you condition.
Very good. Thank you.
Oh yes.
So when
Well, I think if you do it with the door, you don't do it on the house. If you don't do the door, if they for some reason they find a door they like that doesn't have bars on it, you could put it on the house. I'll leave it up to staff to moderate it.
I got it. I'm sorry, I forgot to turn on my microphone. So, okay.
We
But I
can start
didn't know
over
whether to
again?
leave that in there or not, that's the only thing.
I think it's. That's a question. What was raising the right part? With or without? I mean, it could be. It's a really design issue. It's just
All right.
adding more design elements to the house, and obviously you kind of have a feeling of what would be appropriate if we put it all over versus in one spot.
Yes,
Fine.
I understand.
You know. You can.
My only concern on a
Present
couple of the
window facing
conditions
the
is that we have them as conditions where there's not a lot of flexibility. That's like, with the tan color versus yellow, I get the impression that you may be a little flexible on variations of it, but when it says use one or the other, then I just want to make sure we don't put the applicant in that corner.
Right. What if we just said
Well,
that
I was talking about
we don't
modifying number
want that
three.
one, but we don't want the color board yellow,
Right.
but something that's a little more muted.
Yeah, my intent was to modify 3 so that they would work with staff.
Got it.
That was my intent.
Yep.
And then 2 you can take out with iron bars and then just has revised the window,
Yes. Got
keeping
it.
with the style.
Got it. Better.
Okay.
And can I beat a dead horse and just throw this one out? You have kind of a neat thing with that side buttress on the left side of the house.
Yeah.
Kind of a neat detail with the arch. You might think about doing a little arch at the doorway, that little porch, rather than just being a beam across, which looks kind of weak. Maybe do an arch, and that would give you the opportunity to do an arch door. So, there's something to think about. Not absolutely, you don't even have to write it down. That's just a throwaway. It's a go-away, throwaway. Really, don't write it down. I just, it was a totally just...
Free design advice.
Yeah, it was
Okay.
with what you paid, that was it.
Okay, so is there a motion?
Make a motion that we approve the one we just talked about. I just forgot the number. 2 PDR 12-1-9819, 900 Cordova. 700 Cordova, sorry.
Approved with conditions.
Approve with
Approve with
conditions.
conditions.
Okay, and then, that's Mr. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, Mr. Karuglian. Okay, and so, Mr. Garagos,
Yes.
Mr. Karuglian,
Yes.
Mr. Malikian,
Yes.
and Ms. Sagai.
Yes.
So it'll be 4-0, approved with conditions. All right, thank you.
Okay. You can go. So next we're up. We're going to do 2 PDR 1225714, 2700 Piedmont Avenue.
Actually, I have updated plans that were just submitted a minute ago, so if you don't mind, I just need 1 second to put that up. It's not so much updated plans, they're just plans that accurately reflect. Can you do that for me? Okay,
Where would you like?
right there. Just
Right here?
right on.
I mean, one on top of the other, right?
Those on top right here. Thank you. Okay. So, and before. I can't because I need to move everything. Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, the next case on tonight's agenda is case number 2-PDR 2000, or I should say 1225714, for a project located at 2700 2700 Piedmont Avenue. The applicant is Gary Akopian. The project consists of, the recruitment, please.
Thank you.
Sorry, you can take your spot. The project consists essentially of constructing a 4-unit townhouse development condominium-style project located at the corner of Piedmont. You'll notice here from the site plan, Piedmont wraps, it is a corner location that essentially wraps 2 sides of the property. There is an existing storybook style home that is located on the south side of the property that is to be maintained and preserved as part of this project. And the new 4-story or 3-story 4-unit development is going to be located essentially on the northeast corner of the project site, facing the 2 street frontages. This project was last seen by the Design Review Board back on October 20th, 2012, this same exact board. At that point in time, the board...
You mean 2011?
2011, thank you, yes. The board, having heard quite a bit of testimony from neighbors and homeowners associations, and having reviewed the analysis, and noticed that I do have the plans for the previous project up here before you, the board voted to return for redesign with a number of comments. Because more than 180 days have elapsed, this new submittal is essentially considered a new project, and so the board would have the opportunity to either approve it with conditions, or return for redesign. So this is not essentially considered a second submittal for final review. It is a first-time submittal for final review, so there's a correction to that. There was a variance approved for the property, and this would be for the setbacks, because essentially in the R1650 zone, you'd have a 20-foot or significant setbacks all along the street frontages. Because you have Piedmont that wraps around both sides of the property, this would have required front setbacks on both sides of the property, and there was a variance granted June 2010, and that variance is still active with an extension. The existing property, and what I'd like to do is just briefly go over the existing situation and then get into the staff analysis. The existing property, like I mentioned, has a storybook home. It is not a part of this particular project, but it is going to be preserved and maintained. There is a condition, a recommended condition of approval, that there be a preservation plan included as part of the package submittal for plan check. So that existing storybook house will be preserved and maintained. There are a number of oak trees on site. There was an arborist staff report that was included in your staff report. The arborist, according to the arborist staff report, the trees are to be maintained, the ones faced at the northeast corner, this existing oak tree. There are 2 smaller oak trees along the interior westerly side, and there is one very large oak tree that is slated for removal simply because the part of the development is at that location. So one of the existing oak trees is to be removed, and its removal has been reviewed by the city's arborist. In terms of the staff report, as you know, is broken into three sections. The first section being site planning. Essentially, the project remains in a similar location to what was previously reviewed by you, given the site constraints, including the existing storybook house and the oak trees. The building footprint is essentially at the front of the lot, and it is going to be replacing the existing duplex that is slated for removal. The site plan, what you have before you is vehicular access from the rear from the existing driveway. The design of the development includes stoops that, as you'll notice here on the elevations, face all frontages of Piedmont. So you have 3 units that face the easterly side of Piedmont and one that faces north. There were a few minor changes from the previous proposal that would include the removal of turret forms that were on the plaza, best seen on the site plan over here. So they removed the turrets. They also relocated this rear portion of the building away from the driveway and the rear storybook house, essentially 12 feet, which was a comment made by the Design Review Board at the last meeting. And there are greater setbacks to provide, obviously, more visibility towards the storybook house. Otherwise, they provide the they meet the landscaping requirement, the lot coverage, the common open space requirement. The common open space is essentially within a common deck along the westerly side and in between the storybook house and the new development. By addressing the street edge, by having such a limited site plan because of the oak trees and the storybook house, it essentially is a site plan constrained and developed in regards to the site. Nevertheless, it seems like it's well proportioned and it does have a relationship to the street that's encouraged by the guidelines. The second part of the staff report addressed the mass and scale, and this is the most critical factor in this particular project because there was a lot of vocal opposition to the proposed mass and scale that you saw here in the plans. Much of the previous comments were in regards to the fact that it was a podium structure and then you had a 3-story development, that the townhomes essentially had a 3rd story to provide a 3rd bedroom. There was also comments were made in regards to the topography of the site. The site slopes down from the northerly side to the southerly side, and the board had requested the applicant to look into perhaps staggering the podium or switching back the garage elevation. Now, the project has returned with a different architectural style. There was also comments made that the proposed craftsman style-like, and again, this was loosely termed because it wasn't a complete craftsman style or craftsman influenced project, but that it had craftsman influences, that the style was inappropriate for the proposed mass and scale of the building as well. So the applicant, the designer, has returned with a project that is more contemporary in nature. There was analysis made in terms of trying to address the topography. It was determined that the podium would essentially be required because unlike the projects on the adjacent side to the west, it's very difficult when you have a common parking area to actually stagger the podium of the parking. And not only that, but you would also, the lowering of the garage to lower the project would also require a greater length of driveway than what would be possible on the project site. So because of the lowering and whatnot, the contours of the driveway slope would have to be resloped, et cetera, et cetera. There were physical constraints to that. So what you see before you is what is being proposed. Currently, the project has 3 of its units having a 3rd bedroom on the 3rd floor. Previously, there were only 2 of the units, the 2 interior townhouse units that had a master bedroom on the 3rd floor. So obviously, you see a change. The contemporary nature of this lends itself better to the mass and scale of this particular project. There's fenestration patterns, there's the roof systems and whatnot, but the contemporary nature of this, what you'll notice here, the building itself meets the height requirement for the zoning. The zoning is R1650. It would have a maximum height of 36 feet or 41 feet from the average top of curb to the very top of the roof pitch, if it has a pitched roof. The project itself now is proposed at, the overall height is 32.5 feet from the average top of curb with an overall height of 38.5 feet overall. So it is within the guidelines. Now, there are 2-story structures, and again, there are 2-story structures, and I want to bring your attention to the aerial. You'll notice that the building next door is a 2-story structure. There are 2-story structures to the north of Piedmont and directly to the east of Piedmont. The adjacent area towards the east along Piedmont is actually zoned R3050. So you'll have a lower density, smaller buildings to the east, and you have the R1650, which is again a moderate density, all along Piedmont to the west. It was discovered that there are no other 3-story buildings along Piedmont Avenue. So even though the actual mass and scale of this building is a little bit more sensitive in terms of the juxtaposition of the roof forms, the elements you'll notice here, they're back and forth. There's the boxiness has been broken up. Essentially, it is a 3-story structure within essentially a 2-story neighborhood. Last but not least would be the style.
Can I ask
Yes.
a question? The apartment's right immediately adjacent to them.
Yes.
Why do they look like a 3-story? I drove by it, I thought it was a 3-story, but maybe wrong.
Now, are you referring to the condominium units directly
Yeah.
to the west?
Mhm.
Okay. Those essentially are 2-story of habitable space above a ground floor garage.
And
Okay.
then a raised retaining wall or raised elevation.
And it's somewhat of a raised.
So having said that, wouldn't you consider it as a 3-story?
Technically, according to code, because the garages are lower than the average curb height, those would be lower, so it would not be considered a story above. So yes, and that's why there was a lot of discrepancy between, what's a 2-story, what's a 3-story in the neighborhood, because also the properties located on the north side of Piedmont, many of them are on a raised topography, so there's a perceived sense that the massing is greater on the north side than there is on the south side. Many of the older apartment buildings are also these boxy developments that are located not only, boxier for 2-story, or apparent, but that because of their greater height, have this perceived greater sense of massing. So again, this was intended to fit within the neighborhood, but we're just making that clarification that yes, there is this consensus, and the board, if the board recalls in the previous design review board discussion, there was a lot of discussion, is a 3-story appropriate or not? And they said that it's not inappropriate in this neighborhood, but that it really depends on how it's massed and, what the massing is and what the scale is. So this is for the board to decide, is the massing and scale of this proposal in this current form appropriate for the neighborhood? Okay, last but not least, and I'll try to wrap this up, but I wanted to give this attention because there was a lot of board discussion last time, and there was a great amount of public interest. I've received a number of letters as well. So last would be the architectural style and design. Again, you'll notice it's very obvious. It's a much more contemporary project. You have a standing seam roof. You have cement fiberboard siding. You have as well paneled fiberglass doors, fiberglass clad windows. You have ornamental wood moldings. You also have metal railings. And concrete steps on grade. Now, a couple of features. You do have a bit of stone veneer on the base work. That's to tie in because as part of the variance approval, there's an existing stone wall around the perimeter that is required to be maintained. So that existing stone wall along the property lines along Piedmont is to be maintained. So now they're including a little bit of stonework at the base to tie it all in. So again, the quality of materials, I do have a material board. It's a higher quality, it's consistent throughout, whereas the previous one was not. And the one comment that staff had was in regards to the colors. You'll notice in the color board palette, the palettes somewhat work together, but when you see it on the colored elevations, that yellow, the banana cream yellow, is rather bright. And there was a comment made perhaps to, even though it seemed to work on the color board, perhaps to tone it down, especially to be more appropriate to the neighborhood. Last but not least, I would like to mention that when we're in talking about mass and scale, there was a notation made in the staff report that some of the elements, even though it meets the overall height, and there is a juxtaposition of these type of gabled roof forms with great, windows, and you'll notice here, these are the windows and doors essentially are the same height as go up to the ridge of the gables. Great elements, yet also some of the elements aren't exactly integrated all too well. And so staff felt that those should be better integrated, especially along, when you see here the front elevation facing easterly side of Piedmont, then the northerly elevation facing the northerly side of Piedmont, but then you have these type of elements that need to be better integrated, and this would be the elevation facing the interior 2 or 3 story condominium building. They also have made efforts to minimize the decking and the windows along that interior property line that they share with the residential, and to also push back the massing on the 3rd floor away from the adjacent structures. That concludes staff's presentation. We do have the comments that were made by the Design Review Board addressed in your packets. So you'll notice in your staff report there were comments made actually 11 comments made by the boards. Those were all addressed in one form or another. Overall, if the board chooses to proceed with the project, staff recommends conditions such as reevaluating and reconfiguring the building forms to be more fully integrated, specifically the intersections between the forms with flat roofs and those with gables that should be resolved, and while the south and west side should be provided with more integration and design interest in keeping, again, with the north and west. 2 would be to neutralize the color for the stucco walls to better fit the neighborhood context. 3 would be to consider preserving the existing oak trees slated for removal adjacent to the driveway. This is in light of the site plan changes and the relocation of the building corner away, and so this would be, if they were to move this building corner a little bit more, perhaps they would be able to keep that existing oak, but again, this is what is provided. 4th would be to consider refiguring the common outdoor space, incorporating more landscaping screening between the storybook home and the development, so more landscaping as more screening along these areas. 5 would be to provide confirmation from the fire and Glendale Water Power departments regarding the proposed location of the meters, backflow devices, and 6 would be to provide a historic preservation plan prior to submittal for plan check. So it's a pretty involved project. There was quite a bit of discussion last time. So does the board have any questions in regards to this current proposal? Yes, that I can give you. And also, I'm not sure if you need the photographs of the site, but I have those as well. Any other questions?
Material one.
Yes, it's coming.
There's the pink, that pink.
While we pass that around, we'll start the public hearing. So open that up. Gary Akopian, please come up and state your name and address for the board. Oh, okay, sorry. Due to time constraints, we'll have, Shuggy?
Madam Chair, Pro Tem, members of the Design Review Board, good afternoon. Shoik Yepremian Consulting. I have to be back in Pasadena at 6, so I thank you for taking me first. I'm here representing the property owner who's present here at this meeting, as well as the project designer. As William mentioned, the project was last reviewed by this Design Review Board on October 20th, 2011, at which time the board made a decision to return the project for redesign. At the time, the decision included some comments and conditions. The project was redesigned, restudied, and resubmitted. Again, this is a 4-unit residential development with semi-subterranean parking in our 1650 residential zone. There is a single-family house which is proposed to be preserved because of its potential historic character. We have filed a setback variance, PVAR 2009-039, in 2010. The variance was approved. It was a setback variance along Piedmont Avenue. Again, this was a unique condition because fronting Piedmont in its entirety is considered front setback rather than street side setback. So that was one uniqueness about the property. Earlier this year, we have filed for a time extension on that variance approval, and we were granted to allow sufficient time for the design of the project to be approved by DRB. The overall site plan, if we compare the previous plan versus the new plan, it's fairly similar due to its constraint, the oak trees, the storybook house, the topography, and so forth. There are some changes to the site plan, but minor, like the driveway curve, the distance between the storybook house and the building. There is also the percentage lot coverage. With the new design, the lot coverage is now 40%, where in the previous design it was 45%. The more common open space in square footage, more landscaping percentage. The prior plan only had 28%, now it's 33%. The guest parking, just like William mentioned, instead of being located outside of the building, it's now located within the subterranean parking. The height of the project, I know last time there were some concerns from the immediate neighbors. is now reduced. At the time, it was 40, I think the earlier version showed 41 feet. Now it's about 38, 39 feet. Again, it's less than what was previously reviewed. If you will look at the overall building square footage, the building square footage was reduced from 7,585 square feet to 7,470 square feet. So if we look at some of these numbers, we can definitely see that there is some reduction in square footage, more open space, more landscaping, and so forth. Other changes include the building design itself. It has more straight edges versus the prior plans. It included more modern style elements than, again, the prior design. In terms of mass and scale, we look at the proposed design, which is a 3-story structure, which is similar to the first version. But in terms of mass and scale, it doesn't look as massive as the prior version. The prior version has more of a wedding cake design versus the new plan. It's more of a vertical design. Again, when we look at this project overall development, the zoning on this property allows 6 units. Again, this is a 4-unit development, so obviously less than what the zoning code allows, with the preservation of the one storybook structure. I think this is the best option that the property owner and the designer can have in terms of this property, the uniqueness of the property, the lot size, configuration, setback issues, and I think this is a better option than the previous design. Looking at the new design, I think the oak tree that was proposed to be removed at the curve near the driveway, I think we can look at that again and hopefully preserve that oak tree, but we need to kind of look at that again and see, hopefully we can preserve that oak tree as well. But we need to work with Public Works and make sure it's possible. But Public Works already reviewed the oak tree, and there was an arborist report, so if it's something that we can preserve, we will preserve that oak tree as well. If there are any specific questions about the design of the project designer is present. And if you have any specific questions of me, I'll be happy to answer.
Any questions? Questions? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Before we continue, I wanted to make sure to allow Shoei the time that she needed, because I know she had specifically requested to be moved up as quickly as possible so that to be able to make to her prior engagement. But there were a number of letters that were sent in and emailed in. You received copies of all of those letters. It included a letter from the Montrose Verdugo City Spar Heights Neighborhood Association, submitted by Andrea Humberger on behalf of that association, in opposition to the project, mostly dealing with the massing, and then also concerns with regards to the Storybook home. There were also letters submitted from Grant Michael, Michael Morgan, and Roberta Medford. So I just wanted to bring that to the board's attention as well. So, okay, thank you. And forgive me, all of these letters, as you're aware, are in opposition to the project, and it's mainly due to the size, the mass, and the scale. Right. Okay. So next, Gary Kopian. Please come up, state your name and address for the board.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, gentlemen. My name is Gary Kopian. I'm designer of the project, and I have an office in Glendale, 65 West Colorado Street, 91204. Now, I'd like to be quick since Vilja described the project very well, and she haven't left anything to add, but I'd like to emphasize on the most important part of the project. So if you let me just approach the board and I go through these comments from previous project, although the projects are different, but there's some common issues that we need to address. So the most important issue was a relation to the site and to the neighborhood. Now, we did our best efforts. First of all, preserve this storybook house. We might simply go for 6-unit maximum development, but we were so tolerant to the history of our city, so we decided to keep it. That's one of important issues that we kept in mind when we designed this project. And second one, we went through the all 9 yards, got all approvals for variances, went there twice, just because to push the building back from the neighbors and create the common open space on the back, so we could have some distance between us and neighborhood. In contrary, we could just push this building here, create the common open space on the front, and maintain that 20 feet necessary for the front setbacks. But we did go to the variance just because we need that separation between two buildings to make pleasant living for not only us but the neighbors too. The second thing is how we approach to the story house. The first version were too close to the exposure to the storybook house. Now we just squeeze the buildings so we could enlarge the exposures and the visibility from the street to that storybook house. Also, by doing this, we create possibility to preserve another oak tree here. So it's possible. We just need to consult with Anna and the public works to see if we could provide alternative caisson foundation so we could preserve it. I did it before. It's possible. To go to the details.
How close is it to your property, the building?
It's here, somewhere here. So it's about, I could say, 8 feet. But the crown, the drip line covered some part of the building, but it's not the part that the garage side. It's just the part where it's a 1 or 2 story with the regular footing. So we could provide that caissons to avoid cutting the tree off. Now, there's another issue about staggering a building. First of all, it's impossible physically since when we lifting down the building, and we need to lift down about 6 feet because the staggering, to accomplish that effect from the staggering, we need another 2 feet from each unit, the drop 2 feet. So 3 drops by 2 feet, it's about 6 feet of total drop, which creates basically 6 times 5, with 30 feet of run, driveway run, which is impossible here in this case. So we're going to ruin the whole access to the storybook house, and it becomes obsolete, the garage and all the circulation. So that's impossible. And we have a limit to raise up this part, since we have an average average curb elevation. So in that perspective, we have no choice here. Just do this. We shrunk the house, and by doing this, we added another story on this level, so we could save that square footage that we're losing by shrinking it. Basically, it was a comment about telling about the preparation of source report. All right. I just shortly say that source report.
Your name can speak into
Yeah.
the microphone, sorry.
I discussed with soil engineer. It's premature now starting doing the source report, but he said that he's familiar with that site, and that's predominantly sand and gravel, which is good for the foundations. And there will be no shorings because of the topography of the site. And that's it. And I discussed also with the plan checker on some handicap issues. I guess, well, from that conversation, seems to me, my impression is that we are good. We're going right on the right direction. Might some differences or discrepancies which we solve without problems.
All right.
Okay.
I have 2 questions.
Sure.
All right. What is this new perspective? What is it showing us? What have you changed in these 2 new?
From previous underneath? From the previous underneath?
Yes.
Oh, we on the previous one we had that higher roof with the.
Okay.
On this one, no.
I noticed, but I wanted to see if you
Yeah, that's
if
only-
you noticed what you've done.
And
All right,
that's
the
only thing.
Next thing is, in the previous drawing, you had this diagram. Have you lowered the building, or what is the relation between the
Yeah,
adjacent?
I have.
Okay, what is the relation between the adjacent building?
We even push a little bit building further from that
No,
neighborhood.
lower, not push.
We did lower.
Okay. How much
I
lower?
have I have that section. I don't know if it's
Oh, okay.
missing.
So maybe
Maybe we.
So those perspectives or renderings that are
Oh, it
prepared
might be
is
there.
based on. Oh, okay, good. So those perspectives and renderings are based on some sort of a field verification, and so the height of the building that you're proposing, is it the same height? Is it higher, lower? Is it?
It's lower than the one that we have.
So it is lower.
Yeah, obviously. It's lower since we are using flat roof, not only because of that, but we're lowering the building to get more effective look.
All right.
And so, this essentially would be the cross-section. You'll notice here, directly through the lot, showing the adjacent 2-story building and the proposed 3-story massing.
Thank you.
The material board, the picture you have of the roofing, that's the color you're talking about, right?
Yes.
Okay, that is the color that's in the picture.
Well, the color of the wall becomes too.
You have hot pink on the board, and that's more appropriate. I'm just wondering if it's hot pink or if it's the one in the photograph. It's the one in the photograph, right? On the
Yeah.
material board. Okay.
I don't know if you put the planter and the ground level planter over the garage, it's sunk down. Usually you have the podium and you have the planter above it.
Which part of it?
Section here.
Yeah.
Is that, you still have a clearance for cars underneath you?
No.
So is your intent to go podium and then have the
We're allowed
planter
to have
above?
7 feet. Yeah.
This is going to be moved above?
No,
here?
no, I think he
Or-
does have it. I
This
don't
is
think he
clear.
answered correct.
I
It's the
have
nose of the
7
car.
feet.
It's
The nose of the car, you have clearance here?
Yeah.
And then this is like a 2 feet?
It's felt. It's just leveled with. Yeah. The depth is 2 feet. Minimum 2 feet.
But that's your own, so besides that little planter, there's no division between your property and then the adjacent
Railing.
existing? It's just going to be like open and then you're going to put
Railing.
plants? Railing. Okay. Existing railing?
No.
One that you're
Proposed.
One that you're putting in? Metal?
Metal.
Open
that's,
picket.
yeah, complements to the rest of the Yeah, horizontal street.
And it runs the whole length?
Yeah. Well, with stanchions
Yeah.
to hold them support.
Just trying to get an idea. Questions? Okay, thank you. Okay, our next card is from Hike Exlenians. I can skip you. Okay. Just go on to Doug Ward. Please come up and state your name and address for the record.
My name is Doug Ward. I live in 2710 Piedmont, adjacent to this property, Unit 16. I'm in opposition to this project, and I have some notes I've written here. To me, the current redesign looks like architecture borrowed from a Las Vegas casino, shopping mall, or theme park. The colors and the appearance of this design fly in the face of the historic Storybook House that shares this location. At the previous design review meeting a year ago, the board asked the property owners to come up with a redesign that integrated the pitched roof and appearance of the Storybook House. This newest version does not even come close to honoring the historical attributes of that 1929 structure. The previous craftsman style design was by far a more eye-pleasing concept than this current banana cream yellow prefabricated stucco palace that is being presented at this DRB meeting today. The previous craftsman style design was a decent-looking building and would have been more pleasing to the eyes of its neighbors. Unfortunately, this latest design will stand out like a sore thumb at the end of our street. Also, I have questions about the wording at the end of page 9 of the Design Review Staff Report, which states the proposed design fits within the neighborhood and is appropriate for its context. The members of the design board may feel this way, but they're not the ones that are going to have to stare at this building every day in their front yards if it gets built. I'm also concerned that my wife and I will lose whatever privacy we still have in our upstairs bedroom because we look right down on this project, or right, I guess, up at it. Due to the size and close proximity of this structure, due to the increased height of this structure, we will also have to keep our shades drawn so in order to avoid looking directly into someone else's window. Additionally, this structure will block whatever incoming daylight we may have left. The common areas, as laid out in the blueprints, will be right below our upstairs window, so we will have to look down on and listen to people gathered below. If these residents choose to barbecue, the smoke will rise up into our windows, which is a problem we already have with the renters who currently live in the existing structures. We really don't want increased noise and smoke. Parking in front of 2700 is already tight, as it is a sharp curved street, which makes passing other vehicles a challenge. If this building goes in, parking should be eliminated from in front of 2700 to ease congestion that already exists there. Curiously, I want to know, why did the owners put this property up for sale after the last design meeting? Were they not committed to this project? And if not, why did they change their mind? Was there a zoning problem? We at 2710 Piedmont are surprised to see them attempting to resurrect this project again, given that the fact that they seem to throw in the towel before. The current condition of the properties of 2700 and 2690 Piedmont have never been particularly well maintained by the owners. These same individuals now want to force a 4-story apartment building into half the size of the space. Given their track record, we have to wonder what the property will look like in a couple years after the banana cream yellow paint starts to fade. Finally, I realize that some of the board members are not fans of the design of the building that I live in on 2710 Piedmont. That being said, is this board going to approve this new design for 2700 Piedmont? If you think 2710 was a mistake, why repeat it by approving this architectural misstep for 2700? Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Grant Michaels. Can you please state your name and address for the record?
I'm Grant Michaels. My address is 2710 Piedmont, number 12. I'm here representing the Homeowners Association for the Piedmont Oaks property. I submitted a letter for my own personal concerns, but we'll try and refocus my concerns here, primarily on the mass and scale. I am pleased to see the 3D renderings, but they do not appear to be accurate. The depiction of our complex shows that it is solid and does not slope with the topography. From the Google Maps image, you can see that it is staggered with the topography and does follow the downslope. To clarify definitions, along Piedmont Avenue, there are townhomes, there are apartment buildings, all of which have only 2 residential stories, some of which do have a subterranean parking garage. Our particular complex has a common driveway, and we have garages that are below grade. There is no residential or living space on that level. They are simply a 2-story structure on top of a single garage. In the 3D renderings, I was hoping to see a depiction of the storybook house and how it would relate to the new structure. I'm not seeing that. With the mass and scale, additionally comparing to the neighborhood, I would like to see how that compares to the storybook house itself. The constraints on the property, the lot size, the driveway shared with the storybook house, the oak trees, there are many constraints. The footprint of the structure hasn't changed very much, but in looking at the profiles of the structure, it appears more massive with the addition of a 3rd bedroom. I would strongly recommend that if the building height were to be removed or the 3rd story were to be eliminated, it would better fit within a 2-story neighborhood on both sides, whether it is the high density or the lower density side of the street. I do have concerns about the oaks, and I'm happy to hear that there is a great consensus in trying to preserve the largest oak. I think that would serve as a good visual buffer between the 2 styles, whether the styles can complement each other, compare, contrast. The oak tree there would minimize the impact of 2 differing styles on the same lot. But I still remain concerned about the north oak, which, according to the plans and the best estimations I have, still the trunk of the tree is within 5 feet of the proposed underground parking garage. When the arborist report, which was listed as a condition of approval, follows the standard template saying that 5 feet outside of the drip line must be preserved. The driveway slope is a limitation, and I'm looking for what concessions are being made by this design to fit into the unique lot that it's on. Thank you.
Thank you. So I have no more cards, so I will close the public discussion and turn to the board for discussion of our own. Who wants to start?
What the heck? I'll start. I probably should have re-listened to the old video to make sure that I tried to stay consistent. I think the issue I probably had with the other one, and there's some correlation with this one, I think in general I'll state that with the reduction, and even though, I mean, we could still talk about the 3-story and whether it's successful enough to justify the 3-story, I think I'm still open to the idea of that. I think with the reductions that's done and the placement of it, diagrammatically, I'm in support of the project. So the question is really execution, which is basically what we're here for. I think the other version, the previous version, at least what I recall from that, and hopefully I was clear at that time, was that it had a real uniformness to it that was unnecessary and didn't help itself. It seemed like you got a window size and you just plastered it all over everywhere. And I think, I'm hoping that's what I said at that other meeting, because that was my intent. And then when we come to this one, I don't necessarily have a problem with the style. I think there's some issues with color, obviously. And actually, I forgot the question that I was going to ask you. Was it is it really your intent to do the sloping top to the French door? That is a custom door, and that is your intention? Then you can just wave yes or no. I should have asked, I apologize. Are the French doors actually the sloping, the top of the French door is slope?
Yes.
It is that?
Yes. And
It's all one door.
it's a cathedral ceiling on that part. So
And it's a custom door done in that manner? Okay, thank you.
lots of money.
Yeah. My fear is that the ultimate bid is going to come for the doors, and that won't be the door. And then there's going to be a line that's going to generate, and you're going to wonder what that's going to look like in the scheme of things. In some ways, this one, for me, suffers a little bit from the other, the problem I have with the other one is that, it's trying to be consistent as if it's a row house, but there's nothing about the site that says that it has to be so uniform between units. So consequently, it's similar elements marching around, kind of unrelated to each other. And I'm actually happy that the 3Ds are here, because I think it emphasizes a question that staff had, and I think the 3D really makes it clear, and I didn't have it in my packet, but especially when you look at the upper ones, or even the upper right one, it really looks like, somebody forgot to frame the flat roofs. There's no reason why those don't have roofs. I mean, I feel sorry for those roofs, because they don't have pitched roofs like the other ones. Those sort of step roofs, stepchild roofs. So I think, especially on this middle one here, I mean, it just for some reason that one doesn't have a roof on it. And I think that very basic response is that then you come to the elevation and you see it on the elevation that for some reason the roof stops and then something else happens. And I think that especially with the color, the fact that you would run at 3 stories on a form that's kind of indifferent emphasizes the fact that it's indifferent. And that, I know we sort of said don't do a podium on the other one, but I do think, especially if you're going to go with this style, that inherent in it is a horizontality that maybe you could generate between the first and second floor as a way of unifying all those disparate elements that are marching around the corner. Or maybe it's more consistent materials that generate a base. It's almost like you created a small vignette element and then plastered it around the building, irrespective of how it related to other ones. And it has that feel to it, where it's just these plugged-in items. And then what people do, which I have difficulty with, is that we say we want to have differentiation in the walls, and then you just generate a whole bunch of differentiation in the walls with not an understanding of what it means three-dimensionally. So while I am supportive of the diagram of the site, I think this needs another pass-through to clarify the volumes and the materials. And I do have a problem with that bold of a color on such a prominent corner. I think it's unnecessarily bold. But I think there's a cue that's coming that, you're using some deep colors, and I think if it got more subdued, I think it could have a real calmness to it, that even though there's a lot going on because you're trying to do all these things in floor plan, that calming the color might help calm the over-drama of the three-dimensionality. But in general, I think it just needs to be unified a little more. It's not like this is this long building that can have this march along of different stuff. I mean, this is small enough that it needs to read as one building. I mean, it's the building next door could sort of march along with some unified thing, but this is small enough that it looks almost like, I was actually looking on the aerial when you think about it, it's not much bigger than kind of the buildings that are right there. And look at what a jumble that is. And this has the feeling of a jumble. I mean, it's small enough, there's no efficiencies in scale that you need to, march these similar styles. I think you can look at it as one whole building. It just so happens to be made up of separate units. I mean, it's that small that it could be more unified as one thing. That it doesn't have to try to be row houses when there's not enough row to make it row houses. So anyway, I don't know if that helps. Maybe it'll clarify as we move along.
All right.
That's my comment.
Well, I can get started on this.
Yes.
Okay. I want to put away this massing question that has come up, that how I feel and why I feel the way I do. We're in a zone that it's an allowed use. We're in a zone that there's ample amount of apartments, ample amount of structures. The question of the three-story can be argued. Majority of them is two-story. The height that is proposed is within what the zone allows. I don't think they're asking for any kind of a variance or anything like that. So as far as the mass of the structure, as far as the height of the structure or the third story, I think for me it's justifiable to have the third story. Now, looking at the design compared to what it was and what it turned out to be, I think it has been dramatically improved from what it was before. Yes, it was squeezed down, so once you squeeze down a three-story structure, you get a taller effect of the mass itself. But what we got in return was a much better opening that you can actually now see the storybook house rather than tucked away behind this curved element that was there. Also, the architect mentioned that there is a possibility of saving an oak tree. So I think combination of those, it's going to soften the corner that I had a lot of problems with in the beginning. I also had a problem with the driveway, how they were approaching down, and I was more concerned about how it would impact the foundation of the storyboard. And I think pulling that driveway closer towards the street gave a bigger buffer area to be able to cut in and be able to actually create the ramp that it's going to be needed. For me, I think the formation of the, if you look at the front east elevation, I think the formation of those stacking on the first, second, and third and creating this base of a wooden element, kind of splitting that with opening and then bringing that, exposing the roof framing with the windows that are there, I think it's really a nice element there. I think it's a much more powerful element than what we had before. I think it was a lot more cartoonish to me in the past, and whereas now we're looking at a lot more serious architecture, I think. Yeah, there are certain elements there. I'm still not sure about the flat roof, why the slope roof was not carried over. It's not really going to impact the height of the building. I think it's going to kind of tie these flat areas together. But I think in overall, I think the shallowness of the roof gives the impression of that craftsman detail, the slope of the detail that we want. But then bringing those elements of the post and the windows going up to the structure, I think that really helps the detailing of that area. As far as the colors, if we were dealing with such a controversial project, why would you bring in a yellow painted building to create more controversy? I just don't understand this. I mean, I just want to throw something at you. It's like, what is this with the yellow color? I mean, it's just so. Okay, I'll calm down.
Like yellow.
Let's bring this color down, and I think we go with the lighter color, with the light gray or earth tone or any other color but this bright yellow color. I think, and overall, I think it was successful. What you've done is a successful design, but I think the colors need to be looked at. The pink roof top, I don't know if it's pink or red or terracotta or whatever it is. I think that color needs to go. The yellow needs to go. The brown siding, it's fine. I would be a little bit. I mean, you have a little green element there that I think that can be helpful to bring out certain elements there. But I think if you carry certain of those roofs over the flat area, I think it will definitely help these elements that are, it just kind of, it feels that it's stuck there. So I think you carry the roof over there, over the flat area. I think that would definitely help. But other than that, I think I'm okay. As far as the, I think I went through the 3-story, the 3D. The 3D does help in a way that, I mean, obviously the massing that was done on the adjacent building, we all know that it's just a massing, and it definitely steps down, and it's kind of slopes back against the facade. But in general, I think it's creating what Mr. Garrigo said, that it's creating this a building, not a multiple of buildings that it used to be. I think that is definitely a help in the whole massing of the project. I think I personally like the gray tones of what you have on your massing model and your computer model, but that's just me. So, but again, I apologize if I said something out of place for the colors, but I do definitely think that the colors are something to look back on, and also the flat areas that I think the slope roof, if it carries over, if it's possible, I think it's definitely going to help the situation. So that's where I stand.
I totally concur with Mr. Malakian, except for the part of throwing something at you because of the yellow color. Although I don't like the yellow either, by the way. However, and I'm sure there's going to be a lot of ironing out of the details when we get to the point of making final recommendations or putting conditions. One thing, and this one does not necessarily apply or address your project at this point, it's a general concern that I have, and a gentleman speaking earlier addressed it partially at least. When this board makes recommendations and staff follows up on those recommendations, the project comes back to us having gone through the staff again, and some of those recommendations are not met. I, sitting here, do not have any explanation as to why. For example, in the 11 previous recommendations, I can come up with at least 5 that were not met. It kind of makes people uncomfortable whether the new recommendations are going to be met or not. Unfortunately, it creates the environment of distrust that, regardless of what the decision here can be, the implementation may be something different, and probably in people's minds that may be a serious issue. Having said that, I would recommend, regardless how we eventually vote, I would recommend that strongly that all previous conditions should be met. The previous 11, the 6 current, and whatever else that the board here decides to add should be, well, the staff has to make sure that each and every one of them are met. And again, do not take this personal. In general, when a project comes back for reconsideration or final approval, and I personally do not feel comfortable when there's this element of not following the conditions to the dot. Sorry? Here, for example, it says, number 11,
Yeah.
include a preservation plan as part of the building safety, etc., etc. And then it says, no preservation plan has been submitted to date.
It's about storybook house.
Okay?
It's just that we need to, well, it could nicely put down on narratives that we preserve this storybook, we willing to preserve storybook house, and it could be part of the permit approval. I don't have any drawing material to show how we preserve it.
Maybe I can assist. I think I would be the first one who would, have this kind of. But I think number 11 says that part of the building and safety submittal. So I think it's part of the building and safety. So I wouldn't really emphasize on that. That's not something.
And I don't have any drawings and documents to support. It just could be on our writings.
Okay, how about number 9, for example? Provide examples for inspiration and interpretation of the architecture.
Oh, this is contemporary design that I'm providing now. This is my own inspiration, and there's no comparison in the neighborhood.
What I'm saying is when the community, when members here or at home have copies of these reports and they see that the condition was one thing and then staff has written no such thing has happened, it leaves the impression that the architect or the owner did not follow instructions.
But in this case, we just...
I mean, it's not fair for either you, us, the staff, or the community.
But we brought to your attention totally different designs. So some of them is irrelevant and it's not connected to the older one.
Okay. Thanks for the explanation.
Okay. Yeah, I was sort of not sure how I felt about the new design. I think the yellow had a lot to do with the overall shock value of it, and maybe trying to go back to the old one and say, no, retreat, retreat. I like this quieter, woodsy feel. But yeah, I'm not going to throw anything. I'm not violently against the yellow. I was sort of shocked by it. And I think for me, I kind of saw that corner as being more in line with the storybook house and more in line with the oak trees. And even though our recommendation was you can go any way you wanted to, the contemporary approach was sort of different than what I had expected. So it took a little bit of adjustment. Do I like this or not like it? Does it fit? Does it not fit? I think the other board members made a point that it does work. There's some elements that could be kind of reworked to make it fit better. To me, it still feels like there's a lot of things going on. It's really hard, like you're trying to match up the elevation to the floor plan, and right there you kind of have to really pay attention because there's so much elements going on, so many volumes that are coming out of this thing that it's like you crammed a lot into a little space. So I sort of was still ambivalent about, well, not ambivalent, but I was still not sure how I felt about the size of the project because of the size of the property. And did it fit in this space, or should it be pared down because of the property dimensions? I think if it was a storybook style or a stucco style, more of an old world style that fit more with the adjacent existing house that you're going to preserve, which is great that they're going to preserve it. I think that it would create more of a developed complex look versus a smaller development next to a storybook house. In which case, it might help the situation because it would have more breadth, more breathing room. So the property would be able to use the storybook house to its advantage to create this stylistic element on the corner versus trying to create the stylistic element that just sits in this new 3 to 4 story building. So I'm not sure if that's really going to be
big argument.
Yeah.
Discussion there, so I don't know if you have time to do that, but I personally think, I don't think, I think Storybook should stand on its own. I don't think a new structure should go in that mimic detail to detail in every conditions of the
No.
Storybook as being, so if you get any style of an architecture there that comes anywhere close to the Storybook, I think that's going to start creating a lot more other issues than what we have. I think right now we have a complete contrast. I think right now we're emphasizing what is new and what is old, what is historic and what is not. So I think once we start bringing that whole discussion of matching what's there, I think we're going to have a bigger problem in our hands as far as the massing, as far as location of the building, as far as, and especially that the Storybook is a one-story, possibly two, and
The high-pitched roofs.
Um,
Well, I think that design element, the roof element, could be mimicked in the details. Not
But
that it's
not-
not that it's matching, like not saying, okay, matches elevation on this face and then just
But
keep
you know
repeating it.
what you're saying
The
to
white
designers
stucco
so
with a
that
piece of wood, and then just take this element, and does it become an element in the door? Does it become an element over the window? Does it become the mailbox? Does it become, you know what I mean? It's like it doesn't
Well,
have to
Storybook
be match.
roof is there because what it's doing to its structure. It's not a mailbox roof, or it's not an entry door roof. So if you start taking that little element and reducing it to a minute scale and then start incorporating into an architecture, that this architecture has to have its own presence. So you start bringing this little details from that building into, I personally think that that's going to create more issues for us.
Yeah.
But that's just me.
Well, and then this is helpful because I'm still in my mind
Yeah.
not sure, which direction is better. Obviously, the Craftsman, the colors are better. It's more muted. It's more
Right.
in keeping with the character of the neighborhood. And I think everyone's in agreement with that. The character should be toned down. Colors should be toned down. So, yeah, I think that the roof lines, the boxiness are maybe too jarring, and that could be softened. And that might help me get to that point where this contemporary look still has that sort of feel that belongs in the neighborhood.
I just personally think that a lot of the front elevation, especially front elevation, has these finish thought process that has gone into. And as you come around to the west elevation, which they know it or not, but it's primarily solid walls because of the privacy, I'm assuming. The roof lines that are there and abruptly changes or stops, and then you get these flat roofs. I think the carrying or extending those roofs over those flat areas and trying to kind of finish that, what it started to be, I think it will definitely carry what is happening in the front around and into the back area.
So, for instance, like this elevation, this sort of gets chopped off by this element, but we see that this is obviously intentional repetition of the roof line. Are you saying then that this
Well,
roof goes into
for
this
example, I mean, on that
flat
one,
roof? This one, I think, you carry this across, and maybe that becomes what solves this corner for me. And so then that element finishes
Yeah, I
it
think-
off and ties it together.
I think on this one,
Leave
it's
it
very,
blocky?
yeah, I think on this one, it's very simple to solve. I think all they have to do is bring this roof out, and then basically this
Wrap it.
will kind of carry over, and you get the same element that comes over to this, to that. And this is, I mean, that solves that problem. I think this roof can carry over, and somehow this flat area can be worked out. I think this element can go back, even if it's not going over anything. I think you want to see this finish and be able to die into this roof. Same as that top corner, where you have that flat area. I think that can carry over.
This is kind of.
I think he just needs to decide
Like
if
this-
it's
this
a roof,
corner
if it's a
here,
roof
if-
structure,
How does that?
and the
that doesn't
flat
look
areas
quite
are
right.
Which is fine. Which is
Stop there.
well, this is because it's in an angle. But I think like extensions of this, that it can just kind of carry over. This can carry over. This can come out and kind of create that full, rather than a cutoff. this can, if possible, go over that. So there's a lot of these little finished parts. And there are places that you may want to just leave a flat roof. I mean, which is
I
fine.
just think there needs to be a reason for the flat roof. I don't have a problem with the flat roof.
Right.
I think it just looks haphazard.
Right.
It should be a roof structure that might have flat roofed areas that make sense three-dimensionally, not just...
This definitely,
not
this is
avoidable.
amazing. I think
Yeah,
this is
that
really
works
nice.
for
This
me.
is really nice, and this is really
That
nice. So-
element works.
And this flat area works. I think what we're doing is we're like looking at it in two-dimensional, but I think once we start looking at it in this element there, you want to see
I don't think
this.
that gets better there.
It doesn't. This is the problem. I think
that's
this is
terrible.
where the problem is. And I think you want to see this lower, you want to see this carryover, and somehow maybe you want to see the same kind of a roof over this, and then just carry it back.
Right, that's what I'm saying. I mean, you could have a flat roof area, but it needs to be,
Right.
at least, if it's something, an element offshoot of this roof structure, then I think it needs to look...
Yeah, and just a roof over this, and just you have that. So I think it
I mean,
definitely.
you could just
solvable.
add mansard to the whole thing, which, I mean, you can add, I'm going to say mansard, it's the...
Well, to me, this element here works
French
really,
mansard.
really well. This element works really well as a three-story element. I can buy it. This, to me, looks like we just plop something on top of
I think the
this.
only- I think
And
the
I don't
problem
even
is
know
that
if I
corner.
can, this corner really offends me. I'm sorry. And this I'm
No,
okay
this is
with,
fine.
but maybe it gets pulled back and it, like you said, incorporates into the roof because all this flatness out here, it's sort of like a sea of what is it and why is this balcony looking over it? There's nothing engaging it. And then look at the other side of it and it's just mass that comes down. So
Again, I don't think I have a problem with these flat areas. It's the transition of this roof versus that. So I think if this can go up higher so that there is a definite point and this can come lower, or somehow this can get addressed, then
I don't know how
a
you,
little
I don't know
bit
how
of
you
a
make it
flat.
lower, though. I don't know how you make it lower.
I don't know
Realistic.
either.
With
But
that big
I'm
of an
just
overhang.
saying that
Well, that roof goes
something
up.
can happen. But this
You'd have to
area,
raise the
I
other
think,
roof.
I think that another roof, certain flat areas will bring a lot of emphasis.
So if we were to raise this element up, it almost minimizes this element as a third story.
I'm not saying it's a solution, I'm just saying
Maybe that's the solution.
I don't think
Maybe
that's
these-
the
it's hard to
No,
lower
I
the
don't-
flat roof because you have these long overhangs on the lower roof.
So you're saying that like raising these because then it wouldn't match the other ones?
No, I wouldn't raise it. I'm just saying.
I'm saying that's
but
the
I-
problem. That is the problem, that's the problem. The flat roof just looks haphazard, like it didn't get a roof. That's the problem.
It needs it needs a three-dimensional termination of the top of the flat roof. I think that's the best way I can put it, similar to what they've done here. I think
Or it needs to be
possibly
a contrasting material or something.
Exactly. If I may, can I? I don't want.
Breaking his own rules now.
If this element, there is a element here that maybe a post or something there that kind of works with this, then you have a section that has a depth, and therefore this dies into something.
I think it probably has to be stronger than just a piece of
No.
flashing.
It's definitely.
There's just flashing
No,
edges
it's
on
not
it.
a flashing. I'm talking about.
I'm saying it needs to be more established.
Right,
Yeah.
Something
exactly.
more than that. It can't just be a
Exactly.
piece of flashing.
No.
Okay.
It needs to be
So I
at
think-
least like a
roof.
Yeah, not a roof, but it's more of a projection. I think some detail that it's there, that it works.
Yeah, even this carrying across
Yeah.
works better than
Right.
just leaving that
Right.
corner.
Right.
My other comment is, I think one of the things that might help with the privacy issues with your neighbor building is if this planter got wider and you could put trees here. In the previous scheme, you had trees planted here, and I think you probably realized that you didn't have space for the trees. If you were to put the planter on the podium instead of sinking it down and made it wider in certain areas where we can plant trees, you'd get more height and you also get more depth for the soil. So I'm looking at this, I think, because you have this sort of undulation of the footprint, to make the areas that are where the building is 15-foot 6 setback, make these planters 5-foot planters, 4-foot planters, and then make it at least 3 feet high so you can have enough space for trees. And by doing that, where's the first setback? We covered it up. So what I'm saying is, because here you have 15-6 and here you have 12, to at least give a chunk of this space would be a 5, I think you can go 5 feet across, and then this would just zigzag against the building. Then you'd have 2 areas here where you could plant large trees, and those large trees could then provide more privacy. So I would say that probably 10 to 10. I kind of wanted to see all this pulled down, and you could do a whole row of trees, because that would be more successful. And these kitchens are actually quite large. This could come down and be in line with this. If you move the door, If you move the doors over, you can. I don't like this layout. If I was a buyer, I'd want counter space or some kind of be able to build in against the wall. Blank wall doesn't really serve much purpose. Having just a single door and a counter, and then pulling this all down, still gives you a usable kitchen. And then to create a deeper planter all the way across would at least give us the ability to put 3 to 4 trees. Where now, if we just did the zigzag, the undulation, I could probably just get 2 to 4 depending on, I'll see, this is 12, so probably 8. Yeah, you probably get 2 trees, 1 here and 1 here. But I don't know how you guys feel about that idea of making the architect change this sort of thing, pull this down, keep this here, and then be able to put a planter that's deeper all the way across and be able to get more trees.
Actually,
Because right now it's just a metal fence. You can look through it. And the plant material that they're proposing is more like low shrubs. So we're talking about like,
So, I think my comment on that would be is I wouldn't push that volume. I think it's a substantial volume. I wouldn't want to change the elevation, but I think what I would do is the planter areas where you have the undulation of the facade, so you have this. So what I would do is I would bring out a little finger out of this. Then in front of this, I would bring out another finger and so forth. So it's a kind of deep in the area, but it would be in front of the entries. So you would have to walk around and then possibly have some benches or something there or some sort of incorporating. And so you can have a deeper areas of the... But I wouldn't move this. The only reason that these, I think, needs to be a lot more substantial. I think. Exactly.
Yeah, that's kind of... What else did I have? I think that's basically it for me. So...
Do we want to go over the...
What do you want to do with this? Do we want to return for redesign? Do we want to approve with conditions?
I think I'm not
deny
comfortable.
with?
Yeah, I'm not comfortable approving it, but I think I'm not going to speak for the board, but like I said, I'm comfortable with the diagram of the building. I'm not comfortable with the way it's executed right now. And I'm not comfortable dumping it on staff. That's where I am.
I think
It's a strong...
the change that was made from one previous to this to here, it's a huge change, and I think the architectural elements that they've added, and they somewhat understood what we were saying. So having said all of this, I have no problem giving direction to staff and having them go ahead and make the changes. So, based on what I've seen and what I got now from the past, so that's where I.
Well, while you deliberate on which way you'll go,
Take a motion.
some of the conditions...
Let's talk about the conditions first.
Yeah.
And then let's
Some of the conditions that were included in the report may address some of what we heard. So if you wouldn't mind, I'll start by reading those conditions one by one and see if you think that it would fully describe or start to describe your concerns. One is reevaluate and reconfigure the building forms to be more fully integrated. Specifically, intersections between the forms with the flat roofs and those with gable should be resolved. So that, I think, should be its own condition. You've spent a lot of time on that.
Yeah.
Is there, and it does seem to us, based on the dialogue that you had, which was very helpful for staff, I hope it was helpful for the applicant too, that it's okay if some of the roofs remain flat as long as they follow the forms of the building and as long as there are easy and smooth transitions that make sense between the pitched roofs and the flat roofs.
Right.
Good. Then I think Board Member Malekian made this comment that
Color?
say again.
The color.
No. The next clause. We noticed that the street-facing sides, the north and east sides, seem to be more fully developed than the south and west sides. So that, I think, should be its own condition. The south and west side should provide more integration and design interest in keeping with the north and east elevations. And it doesn't state this here, and I'm sorry for that, we're particularly concerned with the elevation as it faces the storybook house, because as you have the facade turning, you have that one gable roof piece, and then the rest of it is, well, as it's rendered, it's a big yellow box, and that's the piece that faces the storybook house. We heard an undercurrent of discussion about that. We wanted to clarify our concern and see if the board shares that same concern, so that whichever way you go, direction could be provided to the applicant.
I think just as you said, I think there needs to be use of more of the strong elements that are on those two facades and bringing it around the corner. It does disappear, those positive elements.
Okay, so it sounds like you're in agreement with the wording of these. Based on your conversation, we may add a little bit more detail to the wording of those conditions in order to provide more clear communication to the applicant and also to the community who is watching this closely. Item 2, we heard some passionate discussion on neutralizing the color for the stucco walls to better fit the neighborhood context.
Said
That is only one sentence that maybe does not reveal the passion at which we heard.
I think that's
Put an exclamation point.
What I am wondering about too, which wasn't very clearly discussed, there's a very significant contrast between the hues that have been chosen, the very dark brown, and whether or not it's bright yellow. I think we all agree there shouldn't be a banana yellow project on this corner. Do you also take issue with the level of contrast between those colors?
I don't have a problem with that. I think the contrast would be definitely a positive addition to the design.
I would just question any of those pinks or terracotta colors with that palette of colors. I don't think it works very well. It should be a gray or...
I think it would be like more of a gray-green
Yeah.
or some sort of
Sage, earthy
sage,
colors,
or
I don't
some earthy colors that will contrast with the
Terracottas are-
brown or
Terracottas.
Trying to say
and
not
a
black or whatever
craftsman
the side-
style.
Okay, so greens,
Not
tans,
contemporary.
but the contrast is fine because, as
Tans,
Jay
I
Platt
would
is
say-
whispering to my ear,
I-
the contrast actually is complementary to the Storybook House because it has that level of
browns and
contrast.
tans and creams
Yeah.
because it would look
Yeah,
dated.
I would definitely
Okay.
stay. I mean, I like this green, I have to say. I mean, the green and the more of a grayish.
But to me, that's still too bright. I
It-
think
it
it's-
is bright.
It needs to
I
be
think, I
muted
mean, a
down.
lot
And the red
darker
too is more. It's like it's too pure of a color. It needs to be more of an earthier version of green or earthier version of a red. That a fair state.
Okay, so that gives us direction on the color,
Right.
because on this, not on every project is color that important, but the renderings have really made that an issue here on this
Well,
project.
I think you said it. You like something that kind of doesn't scream out at you. It's just kind of quiet. So the color palette is soothing, quiet. You know.
Okay,
that kind of
so those are the two big design issues that we've heard. Three, we've heard some consensus about preserving the oak tree. We're also recommending to relocate the very small piece of building, which is now the only thing in the way of the oak tree. It sounds like you agree with condition number 3. Would that be a consideration or?
If they can do it, I'd like to condition
Okay.
it because I think that tree definitely helps that corner. Because then, you know, as you come around that corner, you see the tree, you don't see a massive building.
Okay, we'll word that in a way that it's conditioned, but it provides a level of flexibility in case it's not at all possible. What we're also hearing from the arborist is that that particular tree is not in the best condition. So, and that's from our city arborist.
Or
So,
if it has to come down, we're not going to condition to keep it.
right. So it's not in such bad condition that it would, it would fall down if you blow on it, but it's not in the best condition. So we also want to keep that in mind when we word these conditions. We didn't hear anything similar to what we've written in number 4. We did. Okay.
She did mention that.
And actually, this was in regards to the widening of the landscape planners for those units that are, for those areas that are recessed at the openings of the kitchen, so.
Okay.
Right, and make it one continuous planner. Just pop out those areas.
Yes, correct. One continuous planner with
And-
the pop-outs.
And then incorporate at least 2 trees.
Oh, you do want to incorporate 2 trees minimum? Okay.
Yeah. Also, they might want to look at moving the planter above the podium, because the way they have it configured now, there's no way you're going to get that depth. At least 3 feet high.
Okay, so we're requiring, I thought I heard you say 5 foot wide and 3 feet high, so we can get
Only in portions.
in portions, so that sizable enough trees can be planted on the interior property line.
Right.
And before we move to items 5 and 6, are there any other conditions that we missed? Bilia, do you have maybe something that I've missed?
No, because all the other ones actually were addressed
Okay.
as comments, so.
So, regarding the historic preservation plan, that's something that we think is extremely important. We're a little concerned waiting for it until the very end of the permitting process. So we'd like to suggest that we have the historic preservation plan prior to plan check submittal.
That's what I was going to suggest.
Okay, so that's what how we've written
So
it.
before you guys sign off and
Before we
design
sign
review-
off and it even goes into plan check, we'd like to see the historic preservation plan. Historic preservation, it should say historic preservation and protection plan.
One concern we would have is the preservation plan often would just focus on the building and what's going to the storybook part of the building and what's going to happen to that. We're also concerned, since that's a separate phase of the work, that there be adequate protection during the construction phase between the construction side and the storybook side.
So the historic preservation plan would be to preserve during construction, not to preserve the actual storybook.
Two things. One would be to look forward, how is the storybook house going to be handled in its restoration in the future, phase 2, we could call it. But during the construction phase for the project you're reviewing, we'd also want either the preservation plan to include a protection plan for the site that's not under construction, the storybook side, or that could be a separate document.
Well, I think in this particular, I think we want to see the protection of the storybook. But do we want to have the preservation plan as well as how it's going to be preserved? We want that as well as part of this? I mean, I'm trying
We
to
would like
understand.
to see that.
Okay.
We think it's important.
Part of the DRB submittal?
That's what I'm...
Well, we would,
That's part of-
It's
on the
not
assessment.
part of the DRB.
yeah,
Before plan check, like you said, before plan check submittal.
what we would suggest
Or the
is that
DRB stamp.
But
what we would suggest is that the protection plan, that protection during construction, is
what is
reviewed prior to plan check.
Okay.
Then before the permits are issued, we would have the preservation plan, which is an ongoing plan for preserving the
I
historic
understand that,
storybook
but my
house.
question is, wouldn't the preservation plan be more efficient if it's done after, or
You mean so
only
they had time,
because
so they had time to review it?
no, no.
Or what?
The reason that I'm saying is during construction, we're preserving, they're putting a fence, they start digging in, and they're exposing some of the dirt, and then it starts settling in, and so it starts cracking the walls and whatever. Wouldn't that be part of the preservation plan that we would want to see as a new set of plans, or wouldn't that be, or that would be just something completely separate, and then we would just get some preservation plan?
Yeah, I think it's two separate documents potentially. One would be the protection plan for the historic side of the property during construction, and the question is, the preservation plan looking forward, would that need to be done immediately before plan check or not? It wouldn't need to be done before
Okay.
plan check. It's something we were recommending because it's been kind of an open issue.
Okay.
We don't understand what's
Okay.
happening with that part of the
Okay,
site.
all right.
And then if it needs to be modified based on
the
construction,
construction issues, and then-
we'll also include that as part of the condition.
Okay, okay.
Because we,
Yeah, I just want to make sure, during construction, something happens.
I just
and-
got confused on that. Are they submitting this document as they're trying to get their DRB stamp for plan check submittal? That's when you actually see the document for the first time?
You would need to submit it prior to submittal for plan check. So before they could submit for plan check, they need
Before
to
they could get their DRB stamp to
Correct.
submit for plan check, they would have had to have given you this
Correct.
document.
That is correct.
Okay, all right. So your DRB stamp for submittal is conditional on you accepting this proposal? Okay, I don't know if
Right.
that
The
was clear to
preservation
me.
plan.
Yes.
Right, I
and
don't know if that was
Or the
clear.
Well,
protection plan, I'm sorry, the
this
protection
is,
plan.
This is, I mean, these are your conditions. What we would recommend, because, rightfully, applicants get very anxious when they're close to getting into plan check and want to get into plan check. So what we would suggest is that the protection plan, we really must see before they even go into plan check.
Well, what I'm
The
wondering is-
preservation plan, we could wait to see that during the plan check process before permits are issued, so they have a little more time to thoughtfully do that preservation plan. So if we leave that open, provides a little bit of flexibility to the applicant to do a thoughtful preservation plan, which they may need some time for, to analyze the existing house, how it should be preserved, et cetera, et cetera.
I understand all that. I just wanted to be clear on what we're doing so they know what the timeline is when those submittals and approvals happen. I just would want them to be clear for that.
So essentially what I'm hearing is that they should provide a protection plan this would be the protection plan that applies during construction prior to plan check submittal, and a historic preservation plan prior to permit issuance.
Okay, that's great.
Okay.
So it was clear.
That sounds good.
And is this sufficiently diagrammed or? Or some kind of
We will be-
boilerplate that people can tap into? Or are they sort of generating-
Luckily, we have Mr. Platt
Right here.
can help guide them.
I'm just curious, is it something that's partially formed that they flesh out, or are they starting from scratch?
There's a type of document called a preservation plan. It can be very, very elaborate. I don't think we would need to go that far on this project. The preservation plan might ultimately be a series of bullet points laying out what is exactly planned, and they'll also have to determine how they're going to use the storybook building. They'll have to deal with some code issues that are outstanding right now. All of those things we'll be looking for, just so we understand where this is going and how the building's going to be treated. That's what we're really concerned about. Protection plan is something that isn't a standard document, so we'll just look at that in terms of standard construction protection.
And then one of our favorite items, meter locations and backflow devices, locating them prior to plan check submittal, so we don't spend all this time at these meetings and with the applicant and then wind up with the big uglies in front of the property. So if that's everything, now you can consider which way to go.
I'm just going to make a motion and see what happens. Even though it says return for redesign, I think you've heard we've been supportive of elements of the project. So I would say return for redesign, or the supportive return for redesign of this project with conditions and considerations noted.
Except for the preservation plan. You wouldn't need to see that.
I'm wording it as they said it. Whatever they just said in terms of
Okay.
deadlines and inclusion is what they just said. That's my motion. Will we go second or not? Somebody else can make one.
Can I second, or?
You can't second.
You can pass the gavel, and you can second, if you like.
Well, if no one else is going to vote with you.
Let somebody else do it as a motion. I tried mine.
I can pass the gavel. I'll second it.
Okay. Motion is passed. Oh, not passed, I apologize. The motion is made by Board Member Garagos, seconded by Chair Pro Tem Sakai, who passed the gavel. So I'm going to go through a roll call, all right? Board Member Garagos?
Yes.
Board Member Kroglian? Board Member Malikian?
No.
And Chair Pro Tem Sakai?
Yes.
The motion passes 3-1. So it is returned for redesign.
And we'll move on to the last case of the evening and thank the applicant and anyone here who's speaking on that case. Thanks for their patience. Julie, I believe you're also presenting this one.
Yes, I am. I just
Okay.
need one moment, please, if you don't mind.
So I'll just announce that it is 2 PDR 2011-025B, 1535 Cleveland Road. Whenever she's ready, we'll proceed. One more? Okay.
One more card here.
The last one, yeah? Steve, one?
Yeah, just stated, this is a project located at 1535 Cleveland Road. This is a first-time submittal for final review. This design review board actually saw the first reiteration, as you see before you, on January 19th of this year, at which time, after much discussion, the board voted to deny the project. So the staff report actually included this particular project in comparison to the proposed project, as well as analyzing the conditions why the board went ahead and denied the previous project and how this particular current project complies and addresses those comments. So, that said, the scope of the work involves the demolition of an existing 2,500 square foot single family home, one story with a detached garage, and constructing a new 3,527 square foot home with an attached 1-car and 2-car garage, because again, any home that's greater than 3,500 square feet requires a 3-car garage. So they have, instead of a 3-car side by side, they have a 1-car and a 2-car. The existing detached garage at the rear will be demolished, and the pool at the rear also is going to be proposed for removal. There will be a new covered gazebo as well. And as you see previously, I'm going to just go through really quickly. The site plan in comparison to the previous plan. The previous one had a circular driveway. The current one, circular driveway has been removed. They're using the existing driveway. However, there is a larger motor court in front of the 2-car and 1-car garage, because the 2-car and 1-car garage are perpendicular to each other. So there's a larger motor court. The house itself sits 50 feet back from the front property line. So it's basically in alignment, because the house to the north is actually set back 73 feet versus the house that's adjacent to the south is 32 feet. So it's somewhat in alignment with the 2 adjacent homes. The site plan works well because it provides a lot of backyard space. It also includes quite a bit of landscape front yard area. They've also obviously eliminated the circular driveway, which was a point of contention at the previous design review board meeting. So overall, the house is well situated and well sited. In terms of a mass and scale, again, this project had quite a bit of discussion regarding the mass and scale, because to the north you have larger homes on larger lots, to the south you had smaller homes on narrower lots. The current architect has addressed that feature by, it is still a 2-story structure. However, as you see here, for the portion of the home that is closest to the smaller lots or the smaller homes on the narrower lots, you'll notice that the 2-story massing has been relocated further to the north. You only have a 1-car garage that's adjacent to the smaller house to the south. The portion of the 2nd story then now has sort of somewhat shifted again away from the smaller homes to the south. But again, on the 2nd floor, you'll notice in the 2nd floor plan that there's undulations, so that it isn't like a solid wall that's right directly adjacent to the house on the north. So there is a little bit of relief as well from the larger homes to the north. There is relief also in the form of open patios on the north and south sides of the house, and based on the various portions and undulations and whatnot, overall the 2-story house appears to fit not only the lot but also to address the previous board's comments in regards to having a house that was completely up to the maximum setbacks for the previous lot, and not having any transition between the larger homes to the north and the smaller homes on smaller lots to the south. Last but not least, in terms of design and detailing, again, the neighborhood is a mix of architectural styles. This proposal is basically a neo-Spanish revival design. It includes materials, stucco, wrought iron railing, their S-tile roofs, all materials that are high quality, consistent with a neo-Spanish revival style. Overall, staff supports the recommends approval, actually, with conditions of the current proposal. There were 6 proposed conditions. 1, to design a narrower entry that is integrated with a cylindrical element above it to become more one piece. This would be the cylindrical element in this portion where you have a 2-story section set back. 2 would be to redesign the column at the rear to a full-size column section here. 3 would be to eliminate the arches above the balconies at the rear and be clear to the underside of the eave. 4 would be to provide 2 additional columns for the trellis that is over the driveway at the front. You'll notice on the site plans 2 additional columns right here. 5 would be to consider replacing the area of lawn with drought-tolerant ground cover. And 6, consider reducing the area of hardscape in the rear and/or provide more permeable paving. There was a well-done landscape plan that, I apologize, it does not pardon, is behind me. This is actually the old one. We'll put up the new one as well, but there was also quite a bit of landscaping provided along the interior property lines, and that was... Yes, we do. Yeah. They were actually sent to you. Sent to you as part of the application. So there's quite a bit of landscaping to provide adequate buffer between the adjacent neighbors, as well as providing a well-landscaped front yard. Again, that concludes staff's presentation. Yes.
Question number 3, eliminate the arches above the balconies at the rear and be clear the underside of the eave. Where's that and what are you proposing?
Eliminate the arches above the balconies at the rear, be clear to the eave, so it'd be directly straight up.
And that column number 2 is where on elevation versus side elevation?
This one. So it'd be more of like provide a full column here, whereas right now it's a half column. Minor details. Okay, we have one letter that was submitted.
You do?
Yes.
Windows and
It might have gotten lost with them amongst all
Yeah.
the other letters that were submitted for the previous cases.
I
But
wasn't even reading the name of it.
there was one email, actually, and it was sent to me this afternoon from Mr. Peter Fwad, who's the president of the Northwest Glendale Homeowners Association. And the Northwest Glendale Homeowners Association supports the current plan. They had a question regarding the windows. Will they be wood or aluminum? Can you specify the wood? They're actually fiberglass wood-clad windows. And the attached garage looks very tight fit for the cars, and actually the garages are the required sizes for both the one car, meaning a 12-foot wide garage, and a two car, meaning 20-foot wide garage. So they meet code. But otherwise, Northwest Homeowners Association supports the project. I know there are people in the audience from the project team that have been patiently waiting to have their turn at the microphone as well. So,
Okay, so I will open the public discussion. Franco Naravian, sorry. A long day. Please state your name and address for the record.
Good evening, Madam Chair and board members. My name is Franco Naravian. 409 West Broadway, Glendale, California, 91204 is my address. I think the best way to present the project is I listened to the tape from January, and I wrote down some notes, your comments from last time, and is to go through those and tell you how this project is different. So the first thing I kept hearing is the issue with the three-car garage. And actually, before that, it's important to note everybody was talking about how this lot is a transition lot between the smaller lots to the south and the larger lots to the north, and so how we have to design the home to blend in with both of them. And then a lot of people mentioned, the board as well as the neighbors, that there were no issues with the square footage, but it was the massing that everybody had a problem with. And then finally, the three-car garage was an objection from the neighbors and from the board members because there's a lot of homes in that area that have a detached garage in the back. So to me, I kind of I started with that. I thought the most important issue to solve is to have a house where you can't see the garage, so that it looks like a house with a detached garage in the back. But of course, for my client's requirements, it still needed to be attached. So the solution was to create to put the house in the front and have kind of like a porte-cochere that you drive through, that trellis area in the front. And then once you get past that, we have a motor court area. And I've split the two garages, put the two-car, you don't even see the door because it's perpendicular to the street. And then the one car is facing the street. And it is 12 feet inside, I believe, yeah. So it's as far as the concerns from the association, it's wide enough for one car. So that's the garages, and then there was a lot of comments made about the monumental shape of the form of the entry, and so my solution was to put the entry at a diagonal, and that kind of takes away from the entry being too monumental. Setbacks, a lot of people talked about setbacks. I wish I had the luxury of giving you more setbacks, but on this size lot, I really needed to push the house to its limits. However, on the south side, where we have there is actually a detached garage that's right on the property line, so I've kept that to 6 feet. And on the north side, we do have the neighbor to the north actually has a very generous setback. I believe it's 20 feet or so. So even though we are 6 feet, the distance between the structures is not going to be like your standard 12 feet, which you would normally have, and we have more of a setback. Let's see. Oh, the circular driveway, obviously, William mentioned that that's gone. As far as the William said S tile, it's a two-piece tile.
Sorry.
Yeah. So, and the windows are recessed into 6-inch walls, and there'll be aluminum-clad wood windows. And that's all I have. If you have any questions. Conditions, as far as the architectural conditions, I'm okay with everything, but if we can keep the entry, I did look at different solutions for that entry piece, and that works the best for me. So I prefer to keep the proportions and the way it is, but I'll leave that up to you.
I have some questions. Does anyone have questions for him? I have some questions for you. Your window detail, will you have bullnose surrounds around the windows? Great, okay. The paving material in the courtyard and also in the areas that are not labeled, like you have on the top plan identified that there's pavers. I'm assuming they're sandset pavers.
Yeah.
And there's when the areas under the trellis areas, the courtyard in the front, the backyard area is concrete. Is that just meant to be solid paving?
Any
of it going to be permeable, addressing one of their
maybe that will be better answered by our landscape architect who's here. Yeah. I'll let him go over that.
And then how do you feel about the columns for the trellises? Some of their conditions were to redesign a column at the rear to a full-size column.
Right.
You're okay with that?
I agree with that, yeah, actually. Yeah.
The arches above the balconies at the rear to clear the underside of the eave. You're okay with that?
Well, I prefer to keep the arches, but if you think that eliminating them is a better solution, then it's not going to
not a make or
hurt
break.
me.
Okay.
I was going to comment on that one, too.
Yeah.
I was going to say I'd rather keep it.
I'd rather keep them, too.
Because I think you're thinking of it as an arch when it's really it's a silhouette bracket detail.
Anyway.
Right.
It's a silhouette bracket detail. I think your proportion may be wrong. It may be too subtle to read as a bracket, and it reads as an arch, but it should. You're right. It should be a silhouetted bracket, a little bit more pronounced.
So I don't know if this is more appropriate.
It's too big. It looks like an arch.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
it needs to look more like a bracket.
Yeah.
Like a bracket.
But one of my comments on the project, maybe that I can have a discussion with you just quickly, is the stonework that comes up underneath the trellises and on all the columns, to me feels unnecessary. And I'd like to see the trellises be wood, because you have wood above, and the wall, if it's a wall column, to be stucco. So do you have a preference either way? Is it strong that you have to have this stone coming up out of the ground?
I don't think on the columns I'm okay, as long as we can keep the stonework on the entry and the planter that we have that goes along the front.
I think that
on the columns.
The heavier elements, the fireplace, the planter walls, and then the entry,
That's
is
fine.
appropriate.
Yeah.
Okay.
What are you saying then, just so I understand, on the
Well,
rear elevation, what are you saying for the two elements?
Okay.
Are you saying those stay plaster?
To me, this looks like Orange County. If this was a wood trellis with wood posts, heavy wood posts, timber, right? Then it's like the traditional historical, how they would have had built it in the 20s, which would have been a stucco house with these wood elements on it, not the Orange County version, which puts rock everywhere to kind of differentiate the forms, which we're always saying, differentiate your materials. In this case, I think that these want to be wood. If it's part of the house, it wants to be stucco. And then, where it's a fireplace or a planter up there, that's where it's the applied rock material. So, I just wanted to see if the architect had a strong feeling before I say, this is what I want you to do. Okay, that's all my questions. Good, thanks.
Thank you.
Valerie Gardner? If you could please state your name and address for the record.
I'm Valerie Gardner. I live at 1545 Cleveland Road, direct neighbors to the north. And I'm here tonight to show my support of the project. I was here for the 2 prior DRBs. Yeah, I'm going to thank you personally. And I feel like the owners have done an excellent job at addressing all of the issues from the former DRBs. And I'd really like to commend the owners for sticking through with this process. I'm sure it's been anything but easy, but I feel like the final result is a beautiful home that fits into the neighborhood and takes both the neighbors and the neighborhood at large into consideration. So I'm also speaking on behalf of some of the other neighbors. Neighbors at 1515, 1525, and 1529 have also told me they wanted me to express their support. So thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for coming in tonight.
That's the last card we have. I do have a question for the landscape architect, so I know he's in the room. If you could come up and state your name and address for the record, and then the question is about the permeable paving.
Yes, Guillaume Lemoine, a landscape designer, 300 Brockmont, Glendale. And it will be paved, no concrete.
So the courtyard and the backyard, the driveway, and the covered trellis areas around the house.
Yeah, we haven't discussed the backyard yet.
Okay.
But all the front to the garage will be permeable.
Okay. So so the backyard, you're still kind of working it out.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Close public discussion.
I'm in agreement with it. I think it's a nice design. I think the comments we said are good. Like I said, I think those arch elements need to read as brackets, not as arches. And I think there's all kinds of examples that you could bring in and talk with staff about design. So I would just recommend that you bring pictures in and talk with them about it. And in support of it.
I think it was a great job.
Oh, I'm sorry to interrupt. I didn't mean to interrupt. Sorry. I'm okay with the entry. It didn't have to change the entry. I apologize. I didn't mean to say that. Sorry.
So I wanted to commend the owner hiring a much better, understanding the what we're looking at. So I think definitely the color is you got it. So I think the color. Yeah, I think the color you got it. So, but putting everything aside, I think it's definitely a much more improved project. I think having the entire neighborhood support of the project, I think it really helps our case and be able to kind of hopefully you understand what we wanted to see and what we got right now is exactly what the intent was. The addressing all the single-family homes versus the two-story homes and how it starts forming the architecture and also the circular driveway. I think all of these definitely help. If you're going to live in the neighborhood, I think you definitely want to have something that it's supported by the neighbors and you're welcome there. So I think in general, I'm going to cut this short. So I think definitely I'm supportive of the project, and I agree. And some of the details are going to help this to be an exceptional project. So good job.
I am supportive of this project as well, and not reminding anyone or even myself about what happened here during the first presentation of this project. However, obviously, it's very refreshing to see the property owner, the architect, the staff, and definitely the Northwest Homeowners Association members working together I'm sure it wasn't very easy, but the outcome is great, and I congratulate each and every one of you for putting all the effort into this project and making it a success.
Yeah, I think it's a brave decision to go away, to depart from what you've been working on and say, start all over again, hire a new architect, new landscape, let's just go. But as you've shown, you probably feel in your heart that this is the right move. As you can see, our room is filled with nobody who opposed your project, and only neighbors who are in favor of it, which is a great testament to the effort you put into this. So I congratulate you and appreciate all your work for that. So you heard my one comment, which was about the stonework. I think that you want to keep it more authentic, keep it more historical, more in the context of what Glendale used to be, the buildings of the 20s. And I just felt that would lend itself better to that style. So I think that the front entry would be fine the way it is. Addressing some of staff's conditions. You've already said that the columns were acceptable, so we'll go ahead and keep those in. I didn't ask the landscape architect about the lawn area. I think the lawn, you probably want to keep lawn. Maybe just narrow it down a little bit, or if you want to look at considering a drought-tolerant ground cover instead, but just keep it flat and green, that would be perfectly fine. I think it's good to think about the environment and water usage. And then the landscaping, the permeable paving in the back, if at all possible, bring more of that into the landscape. I realize it's pools, you want to have solid paving, but in areas where you can bring in more permeable paving materials around that area by the landscaping or the trellises, that would be appreciated. So, and I think it'll be a nice look to complement the house as well. I love the colors. I think you did a great job with melding the woods and the stones and the stucco colors and all the high quality materials. So
It's
good
a
job.
colorful day.
It's a colorful day. We're really talking colors today. And the landscape plan is, I mean, 6 pages. That's pretty impressive. So all in all, it's a really well done project. Not that the first one wasn't well done, but it just didn't fit the site the way that we felt it should.
Right.
So.
Okay. Do you mind if I read back the comments really quickly? Okay, we're eliminating number 1 of the proposed. Number 2, we're redesign the column at the rear to a full-size column. Number 3 is going to be amended. Instead, it's to redesign the arches above the balconies at the rear. The arch elements need to be more of a silhouetted bracket, less like an arch. Is that correct? Mm-hmm. Number 4, to provide 2 additional columns for the trellis that is over the driveway at the front. I believe that was to remain. Number 5 was to consider replacing the areas of the lawn with drought-tolerant ground cover or reducing the proposed area of lawn, and this would be a consideration either or type of mentality. Mm-hmm. Now the new number 5 would be consider reducing the area of hardscape in the rear and or provide permeable paving. That is still on there. One comment, I'm not sure if this is what you want to add this, just to make sure that the permeable pavers be used for the driveway, motor court, and patio areas.
I have pavers. I don't know if it's not stated, then yes.
Okay. And now, was this the change, and I'm not sure if this was across the board. I know board member or Chair Pro Tem Sakai, you would like to see the trellises be wood and the wall columns be stucco, and the planter walls and the entry remain as stone. But would this be a consideration or would this be a condition?
I think if it goes wood, it has to be large. It has to be like an 8x8.
Like a large.
It has to be large-sized members, otherwise it's going to look funny.
I would love to see the house built that way. I would condition it, but I don't want to keep it as a hardship. I don't think it's
Consideration,
a hardship.
condition?
Consideration.
Yeah, consideration, because to be honest, a big plaster column with the wood trellis would also be in keeping.
Or it could be faux wood, the whole thing, posts and beams.
No, I'm saying seeing it as a plastered element with a wood trellis is also in keeping.
Oh, okay, yeah.
I mean,
that's true.
It's.
You could do all
I agree,
plaster.
it doesn't need the stone. I think the stone kind of confuses it, but a large plaster column that had square
Like a
plaster
cap,
column.
and then you have
Right,
the.
and then you had a wood trellis. I mean, that's
wood
very
trellis.
much.
That's true. They've done
Yeah,
that too.
I think that.
I mean, either one, but I think if it's wood, it definitely has to be larger. It has to be like an 8x8.
Right.
Right.
It has to be a very substantial element.
Right.
So that would be a basically essentially a consideration.
It's a quality house. I know they'll do the right thing.
Okay.
It's a consideration.
Okay.
It's yours.
Would you like us to condition the removal of the stone and then consider different materials?
Well,
I think the stone does help the way the entry is done. I mean, I think the stone helps it because the stone reads as a solid element. I think where it gets weaker is when it's used as a very thin, pieces like in the back. I think it's less helpful. But I do see how it works with the entry.
it's not the entry.
No, I mean just removing the removing the
saying.
stone
It's not
from
as
the columns
successful
only.
when it's used very
Right, so do we condition
slim,
that the
so.
stone comes off of all the columns and they can figure out what they want to use,
Yes.
stucco or wood?
Okay,
Yes.
that's
Then we'll
more clear.
condition that.
Thank
Didn't
you.
mean
So-
to confuse that.
Now I'm the one that's confused.
I'm confused too.
Thank you. Board Member Malikian is in the same boat.
I think
so-
we felt that if you can take the stone off as a condition,
I was just thinking
but
how
what they
please
put on
extend
it, if it's a stucco with a wood trellis, or a wood with a wood trellis, or if it's a wood trellis.
So would this be for the trellis and the
So
wall
essentially, you're
columns?
saying that just get rid of the stone veneer and put
Well,
something else
Not
on
exactly
the columns.
on the columns.
Yeah,
Columns, but it's successful at the
it's
front.
successful on the bottom and the front, like for the planters, the raised planters, and for the entry element, and for the fireplace.
Okay.
Do
So
you
just
understand?
remove the
Okay.
stone veneer from the
I
columns
don't.
and consider additional different materials.
Yes.
Okay.
yes.
So with that,
You wouldn't put.
I will make such a motion to approve with condition.
I have a motion by Board Member Garagos
I'll second.
and a second by Board Member Malikian. Board Member Koroglian,
Yes.
Board Member Garagos,
Yes.
Board Member Malikian.
Yes.
Chair Pro Tem Sakai.
Yes.
The motion passes unanimously, 4-0. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, and then we do have one set of minutes, actually, that we do need to approve, and those would be from...
Many minutes.
Oh, and forgive us, we're still having our meeting, so if you don't mind making a... Thank you. So, apologies there. Okay, so then these would be the minutes from July the 26th, and all 5 board members were present.
Make a motion to approve minutes of July 26, 2012.
Second.
Okay, I have a motion by Board Member Garagos, a second by Board Member Malikian. Board Member Garagos?
Yes.
Board Member Koroglian?
Yes.
Board Member Malikian?
Yes.
Chair Pro Tem Sakai?
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously, 4-0. With that said, Stephanie, do you have any announcements or anything? Okay, is there a motion
In a
to
month,
adjourn at
right?
7:30?
In a
Motion to
month?
adjourn.
Pardon?
In a month?
Motion to
Yes,
adjourn?
we will see you. Our next meeting actually would...
September.
October 25th date.
We're skipping September?
Like
No.
September, October. It's like next year or this year.
September?
September 27th, I apologize. September 27th.
Okay.
All right, so
We're adjourned?
September 27th, I see Mr. Malikian.
Okay.
Vacation plans?
Okay, yeah.
Well, if anything
Okay.
happens, please just let us know. And
Did
otherwise,
we
there-
change sequence? Which, the double, the two thing changed?
yes,
It did, okay, all right.
the
Just checking.
change sequence. So the next meeting would be September
My
27th.
phone does it automatically every 2 weeks.
Yeah.
So,
Okay,
in this
we're
case-
adjourned.
Thank you.
Bye. Good luck.